think.
Hello, welcome to Rules of Rebellion. I'm Tasha, this is Brandon, and we're talking today about a question we got in one of our posts about boundaries earlier this week. If you didn't see it, there are 5 ways that I understood or ended up realizing afterwards that I needed boundaries. And the third one that was mentioned and then asked about was I didn't know how to answer, what do you need, what do you want? And we find this to be a challenging question for most of the people that we work with, and a lot of people who are overwhelmed and busy and high achievers because the life is moving so quickly.
I think it's a hard question to answer at any given point in your life when you've got a lot going on. It's really challenging.
So your whole life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if you're not actively really dialing back into yourself with great intention on a regular basis, there's so much extraneous bullshit that's flying around all the time. It's really hard to actually identify, this is what I want. Mm-hmm. This is what I need. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the times when we answer that question for the first time, it is, I want to be able to do this for other people, or I want my kids to do this so that they X, or I want my partner to finally understand that blank. But that has nothing to do with you. It just makes your life fucking less aggravating. But the reality is, what do you want and what do you need is a hard question to answer. And a lot of the times I think it's a hard question to answer because we think it has to be the life-saving answer that we've always been looking for, rather than like, I need to sit down, or I need to pee, or we blow over the base needs, which is one of the reasons why answering the questions is so hard.
Well, and the question that was being asked was like, how is this question relevant to boundaries in particular? And so for those of you who are new to boundaries, or you're hearing boundaries maybe in a different way from our content, because we do talk about it differently. Hello, everybody who's here. I see C. And
what is up, C?
Happy to see you guys. Let us know that you're here, where you're coming in from, what your experience is with answering these questions. What do I want? What do I need? Is that hard for you in this moment to be able to answer that? Let us know if you actually know any of the answers to that right now. What do you need right now? What do you want right now? And this has to do with boundaries, because the very first thing you need to do to be able to put boundaries in place to be able to give yourself more space, more time, more peace of mind is to know what you want and need. You can't put boundaries in place. One of the things that I think is the biggest challenge for a lot of people in being able to put boundaries and hold them with themselves or with people they care about, with strangers, with people at work, people in their business, is that they don't know what they need. And so they don't know what the boundary is supposed to be. So they start putting out boundaries that other people have or that they've heard they're supposed to have. And then they can't follow through with them because they don't actually have an internal drive for that to be true. They don't see the value in that rule that they've set for somebody else, which is its own challenge, its own problem. And the reality is that we think we should be able to just quickly and easily answer, what do you want? What do you need? And it's not as simple as that.
Well, and I think one of the important things about this is, if you don't know what you want and you need, and then you decide to take it upon yourself to start putting boundaries in place, what you're doing is you're actively going around and telling other people what they can't do, rather than establishing a system for you to be able to honor what it is you want and you need. And if you don't know, then all you can think of is, I just need all these people to shut the fuck up, or I need you to stop doing this because it's a problem. When, if you were to identify, I need this, I want this, and therefore these things need to happen instead, it's a different conversation.
Well, and I want to dig into that thing you said. What I used to think boundaries was telling other people what they're allowed to do around me.
Right.
What boundaries actually are is telling people when I'm going to leave the experience that no longer is aligned with how I want to exist.
Right.
And that is not the same thing. And it is one of the reasons that some of my relationships felt so controlling for the other people that were in my life. I thought I was setting boundaries, but what I was really doing in their perception of it is I was trying to control them. Telling other people what they are allowed to do is controlling. Telling people, I'm not going to stick around for this bullshit because it's not kind of the environment I want to live. It's not the energy I want to be around. It's not the values that I want to live, and I'm not going to be part of it. Is you putting boundaries in place. But you can't know what that is unless you know what you want and what you need. And so when we're talking about this, we're talking about in all the different specific categories of life. So we were talking about money in partnership. The boundaries, we have not met a couple anywhere on the planet that has the exact same experience and are bringing the same trauma and the same values to the relationship with money. We had very different experiences with money growing up. We have very different things that we need to constantly rework ourselves into our conversations. We have different triggers about money. But the compassionate curiosity part, what do you want? What do you need? What do I want? What do I need? Allows us to come to the table with information rather than judgment, right and wrong. That's not wrong. You shouldn't want that. I should want this. And when you have compassionate curiosity for yourself and with the people that you're doing these things with, whether it's your partner in collaboration, your kids with they're growing up and the things that they're going to choose to do that are not the same as you, your adult parents, your clients, your mentor, all of the people that you are collaborating with and partnering with in your day-to-day life. When you have that understanding that nobody's right or wrong, but this is what I need or this is what I want, it shifts the conversation from being a power struggle and about butting heads and being defensive to let's figure out how we're going to move forward with this information that we know now to then make progress on both of what we want and what we need.
Well, and it's so important to also remember that boundaries don't have to be a thing that happens in response to crisis. It is just about making sure that you are honoring how it is that you're going to best move through your life. And so something that's like just ridiculously simple, we happen to be very beneficial and live maybe less than 5 minutes away from a gluten-free vegan ice cream place.
Yeah, we do.
It's amazing.
So good. Shout out to Kate's.
They make really good shit. And I like ice cream, but not nearly as much as some people I know.
I love it.
And so just the other day, like, we were going to celebrate, and Tasha and one of our kids really wanted to go get ice cream. And I have kind of gotten maxed out on ice cream. I'm not a big ice cream eater, and I'm more of a savory person than a sweet person. And so I decided that what I wanted and what I needed was different than what they needed. And so instead of being like, we can't get ice cream because we're not spending our money on that, I was very happy to say, that's awesome for you. Go get ice cream. I'm probably going to get myself a 99-cent bag of chips and call it done.
Yeah.
And that's just a really simple exercise in, I'm creating a boundary for myself about what I'm putting into my body. I'm creating a boundary for myself about how I would like our money to be managed. I'm happy for us to spend the $10 for you guys to go get ice cream, but I don't want it to be 15. I'd rather our money be spent, saved, utilized in a different way. Go have your amazing experience. I'm supportive of it. I want to hear all about all of the things. And I'm going to hang here because that honors my needs and my wants right now. That had nothing to do with a big life moment. It was just ice cream or not ice cream. And instead of letting myself get swept up in the, well, this is how we're supposed to do it, and we're supposed to celebrate, and we've had years of not being able to do things like this for health, so I'm just going to go along with it anyway. I physically would have felt like crap, and I would have been annoyed about our spending because I tacked on to the spending that was already happening in a way that wasn't aligned with what I wanted in the moment.
It wasn't about the $5. It was about what the $5 was being spent on. It wasn't aligned with your wants.
Right.
Yeah.
And when your alignment is not, when you're not in alignment with your spending, $5 might as well be $500. Mm-hmm. Because you still have the same guilt, shame, frustration,
or resentment
of whatever it may be. And so I feel like that's like a really excellent example of your boundaries don't have to be enormous, but also what you want and what you need doesn't have to be like world peace or I just wish that all of my debt would be cleared. Like, of course we all want those things. And in order to get no debt, world peace, we also need to recognize that like there's shit in between here and there. And if you don't spend time with yourself learning about who you are, you're not going to be able to say, I need this, I want this, and therefore, these are the things that I am not going to allow to my space.
The other thing that's in this conversation is when you are thinking about what do you want, what do you need, you have a background list of rules, an undercurrent of how, hey Jenny, how you are deciding what's good and what's bad. Because we all grew up in a society. So there's some conditioning about what's good and what's bad. If you haven't already looked at our stories for today, make sure you look at our stories today because there's a longer sequence talking about this. But the idea that something's good or bad inherently or that something's right or wrong inherently is made up. Mm-hmm. 99% of the things that we think are good or bad are arbitrary. Somebody else made it up. It's usually an able-bodied, cis, hetero, Christian, wealthy white man, but it's made up. And so we have decided that this is the way to do it. This is the right way to spend your money. This is the right way to be in a relationship. There's one way to be a good partner. There's one way to be a good friend, a good mom, a good child. Like, there's one way. And the reality is, a lot of times when we actually look at doing an honest audit of our rules about what it is to be a person, to be a business owner, to be a coach, you have to do it this way. Like right now, the 10 years ago version of me would look at me right now like, you don't look professional enough. My professionalism has nothing to do with the fact that I'm wearing a hoodie because I'm cold. But there was a rule that said it had to look this certain way. I couldn't have an undershave. I couldn't have pink purple hair. Like, there are all these rules I was following because of what other people had told me I was or was not allowed to do, and what other people's beliefs and their rules were about being successful and being happy and all of these things. When you're looking at that and you're getting honest with yourself about why you're choosing to do things, it's because of other people's expectations. It's because you don't want to disappoint people that you care about. And this is baked into the conditioning that so many of us have received by living in a patriarchal society and a capitalistic society, that your job is to produce and your job is to make other people comfortable and happy. And when you start pulling back from that practice in your relationships and you start examining, what do I actually want? There is discomfort in that, because you have to say, I'm choosing me over this other person that I've chosen for this many years. And those conversations can be uncomfortable, but that's why having boundaries and understanding what boundaries are. I'm not telling you can't do this. I'm not telling you that you can't drink. I'm just telling you that I'm not going to be around alcohol anymore.
Right.
I'm just telling you that I'm not going to be smoking cigarettes with you anymore. I'm just telling you that I'm no longer going to be gossiping about my sister or my brother or my dad. I'm no longer doing that. You can do whatever you want. I'm just not going to be here for that. And when you remove the judgment of, you're not wrong, I'm just not doing this anymore, it becomes easier to be able to maintain relationships and also choose yourself, because you actually have full power over what you're doing, as opposed to getting so frustrated and so overwhelmed and so irritated that other people aren't doing the thing that you decided is right or wrong. When you remove the right or wrong, which is what compassionate curiosity is all about, that's our first pivot in our 5 pivot framework that we use to get out of perfectionism patterns and change your lifestyle, change the experience you have in your day-to-day life. That pivot is pivotal. That first one is so crucial to be able to start shifting into a completely different day-to-day experience in your internal processing and how you make decisions.
Also, when you're examining what do I want, what do I need, and you're making choices, and then by default those choices become boundaries, the other thing that's important is when you're looking around, recognizing that when people are doing things that are in conflict with your values or out of alignment with your values, there has to be a moment when you just hold space for the fact that they're doing what they want and they're doing what they need. And so you may have an idea of what your kids or your siblings or your parents or your partner should be doing. And the reality is, if they haven't asked for your help, and if they aren't seeking out external help, then we have to assume that they're doing what they want and what they need. Whether they are or not on purpose, whether they are or not with intention, is a completely different conversation and also none of your goddamn business. But recognizing that when you're honoring your wants and needs and placing boundaries, one, there's an opportunity for it to make other people uncomfortable, and that's their shit to manage. But also, when they are making you uncomfortable, the fact that they're doing what they want and what they need is not at you. You just happen to be in the same fucking spot when it's happening.
You used to relax at me all the time.
Get the fuck out while I'm relaxing if it's pissing you off. Like, and that's the thing. Like, us being able to recognize, it doesn't mean we can't collaborate with others. We just also have to recognize that their wants and needs are different than ours, and those require boundaries. If your wants and needs are to be fucking hammered all day long, I want and need to be far, far away from you. I hope you the best, but at the same time, we're not going to have a lot to talk about, and that's okay. You want different things than I do. We've got to stop trying to force each other to fucking get on the same page, which is one of the reasons why boundaries done with compassionate curiosity is such an effective way to use that tool, because we're giving everybody permission to be themselves and just acknowledging, I'm going to be myself, and maybe sometimes you're not going to be with me while I'm being myself.
That's a level 201 interpretation and integration of boundaries is when you say you want what you want and I want what I want, and they're not the same thing. And so now we need to figure out how we're going to cohabitate, how we're going to be in a relationship, and how we're going to navigate this together, which is totally possible when neither one of you are taking it personally that the other person has boundaries.
Right.
This was not something that we were good at first.
No.
And it took a lot of practice for us to realize I'm activated right now. My nervous system is activated because you put a boundary in place with me that I feel rejected by, that I feel abandoned by, that I feel judged by. And there was actually no judgment. Brandon was saying, I am going to do these things and I want to do this. And it was not at me, it's just this. And so when you change these things in relationships, it can be really challenging. It feels, those of us who have tried to put boundaries in relationships, especially with our parents and our siblings, those tend to be the hardest. We've tried to put boundaries in those situations and we don't get the feedback that we want. We have people like judging us or saying, oh, well, you must be too good for me, or you have this going on, or you're this because you're putting the boundary in place. It can trick us into thinking, at least at first, that, oh, that maybe that wasn't right. Maybe I shouldn't want that. Maybe I'm mean. Maybe I'm unkind. Maybe I'm not being a loving partner. I'm not being a loving adult child. Maybe I'm not being a loving whatever. And that is not your responsibility. It's hard to feel that way in the moment because your nervous system gets activated. But this is one of the things we talk about with our clients, and it's actually one of the master classes. So if you haven't already seen it, we have a flash sale going on right now for some of our offers for our 4-year anniversary in Rules and Rebellion. So we've been in business together for 4 years, which is bananas.
Because that was never a possibility.
That was never going to happen.
Because we did not have compassion and curiosity or boundaries for the first 10 years of our marriage.
But we have a summer masterclass series. Some of you have already attended the nervous system regulation, Regulate to Elevate, that masterclass that you have been watching, that you've been registering for the last several weeks. That's part of the 4 masterclass series that we're doing. The other 3 masterclasses that are in this series is boundaries, happy, healthy boundaries, your compassion, curiosity, and money is not a 4-letter word. And so these other three masterclasses are because of how many people we see struggling with the same things that we were struggling with boundaries, compassionate curiosity, and all this money trauma that we didn't realize was happening in our day-to-day lives. Every little moment that we were thinking about money, spending something, having to decide what do I want, what do I need, and putting boundaries around that was really challenging. And it triggered the fuck out of both of us in lots of different ways that we didn't know was happening. And so when you know all of these pieces, which is why we put these 4 masterclasses together, when you know all of these pieces, it becomes more manageable and you can actually take action that you feel good about, that brings your relationship closer, that deepens the connection you have, rather than creating another wedge and widening the gap.
And a lot of the times, and this happened with the both of us too, when you start to dig into the question, what do I want, what do I need? And you start to learn how to honestly answer it for yourself. And you start to learn that what do I want, what do I need doesn't have to be as large as a new car for it to be an effective exercise to actually help you move through the day. The people that are used to you operating in the way that you always operated, when you weren't honoring what you want, what do you need, have the opportunity to see and act and use language that tells you what you're doing is ridiculous and this is just a phase. And a big part of the reason why boundaries operating from a place of compassion and curiosity is important is because it helps you to create a structure that's safe for you to consistently come back to what do I want and what do I need. Because if you're, and we did it with each other. Like I remember when Tasha would come back from therapy and be very assertive and having the thought like, oh, it's a therapy day. Okay, this is going to like, the volume's going to dial down like in 2 or 3 days and we'll just get back to normal. It didn't get back to normal. And thank God.
Kept going to therapy.
And so did I. And I'm sure that you're like, when's this shit going to end? And so I think it's just so important that we acknowledge that you're going to potentially be met with, when is this phase going to end? When are you going to come back to how we all know is normal?
Why are you acting weird?
Right.
Why are you pushing me away? Yeah.
The reason why you're acting weird and the reason why you're pushing people away is because you're asking yourself, what do I want? What do I need? And you're actually listening. And for the very first time in your life, you're saying, I'm not getting up to do that thing because my fucking back hurts. And if it sits on the floor, it sits on the floor, or you are more than welcome to clean that up all by yourself. Or I'm not making lunch for you today because you are old enough to figure out how to operate peanut butter and jelly because you're capable and I'm tired, or I've got other things to do, or because I just don't goddamn want to, because that is an absolutely okay reason. Being met with, this is just a phase, it makes us shrink, and it makes us think, oh fuck, I'm taking up too much space, I'm being too selfish, I'm being an asshole, people aren't going to like me anymore, which is when boundaries come in to be so important, to be able to solidify that so that you can be the fullest self that you can possibly be. Those boundaries are going to let the people in your life, quite frankly, either take the time to get used to it or seize an opportunity to go express themselves elsewhere.
And so let's reframe boundaries. Boundaries are expectations that you set for yourself and for other people, clearly communicating expectations. My sister's on here.
What?
She has some boundaries. We've worked through this together for a long time. So boundaries are the expectations that you set for the environment that you want to have for your own mental, physical, spiritual, and financial well-being. When you set expectations for the other people in your life of how and when you're going to be there and when you're no longer going to be there, when you're going to leave, it makes it easy for people to say yes or no. It doesn't make it easy for them, but they know where the line is. And one of the things that we've all heard the phrase clear is kind, this ambiguity that we have of like, oh, I'm not, this is how I want it to be, but then the next day it's not how it's going to be. And then the next day it is, and the next day it's not. This like, yes, you can come into this space like that, but then you can't. We see this a lot of times in couples relationships where there's one of the two partners has decided that there needs to be a boundary in communicating about money after a certain time or when the other person is activated. And then they have sex and they don't get to actually talk about the financial challenge they were having. And so the mixed message there is, I'm okay with everything as long as we just distract us from that money conversation. And that can be a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. But this setting clear expectations for when you are going to be somewhere, when you're not, the kinds of conversations you're willing to have, the kind of energy you're willing to be around, the way you're going to invest your time, money, energies, attention, any of that is what boundaries are. So when we hear boundaries, a lot of us are hearing like the statement of like, just tell people no. And that's part of it, but it's such a small part of what boundaries actually look like when you're putting them in your real life. It's more about, this is the parameter for this thing.
Well, and the part where people are saying boundaries just say no, or no is a complete sentence, that's not your first move.
Not in a relationship that you want to stay in.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you are in a dangerous, toxic relationship, that is not your first entrance into boundaries. If it is, you're going to be a lonely, angry person. Because you just don't let any, like, no doesn't let anything happen. And one of the things that is such a misnomer about boundaries is that there's no communication back and forth. It's just delivering consequences, and it's just delivering an ultimatum. Whereas being able to say, this is what I want, and so this is what I need for this period of time. And then after this period of time, I'm going to see how that worked for me. And then I'm going to talk to you about what did and didn't work so that we can create a new structure or a new boundary. But recognizing that, like, we're getting so much information about boundaries are so important, which they are. But if you're starting out with go fuck yourself, then nobody has anything to work with. And then you are an ass. And this is a phase because nobody can manage the level of energy that go fuck yourself brings for an extended... Go fuck yourself is not sustainable. Mm-hmm. You just can't.
That should be a shirt.
It's just not. You're going to be tired and you're going to give because you're going to realize go fuck yourself means nobody is showing up to help you do anything, and we can't do anything by ourselves. Collaboration is necessary for absolutely everything, but collaboration doesn't mean it's a revolving door into your entire life. So being able to figure those pieces out is really important.
So we only have another minute or so because we are going berry picking today with the family. And for those of you who are in business for yourself, those of you who are creatives who are having a hard time creating boundaries around getting your creative projects done, this is an important thing. I mentioned berry picking because it is what we're doing this afternoon, but part of that is boundary work that we've had to do specifically for me because I have a long history of work addiction. Cutting out part of a work day to go do something fun is something that I've had to work really hard at being able to do and not feel guilty about, not feel like I'm letting people down, not feel like I'm wasting the time, where the time could not possibly be spent any better because it's gorgeous here in Portland. My family and I love doing things when it's not 1,000 degrees in July.
Yeah.
And this is something that's going to be aligning with other goals that I have. My business goals are not the only goals I have. And so creating opportunities and boundaries around, okay, I'm working for the first half of the day, and the second half of the day today, I'm going to go berry picking with my family because that's also aligned with the goal I want to have. That's also a part of my life that I want to make sure I deepen my relationship with. This is all of the things. I had to get curious about what I actually wanted, the rules I had about doing work well and being a professional, what it means to work enough, when you're allowed to rest and play. That's all part of the boundaries conversation, compassion, curiosity, and my relationship with money. In addition to understanding that that was activating as fuck for my nervous system to cut out of work on a work day early. The reality is I've been a business owner for 20 years and I can make my own hours, and I have decided, fortunately, over the last couple of years, I can do whatever I want. But this takes work and it takes practice. And for a lot of the time, it took someone outside of me saying to me, I'm reflecting back to you what I'm seeing. This is what you say, what you want, and what's actually happening are not the same thing. And we were only able to have that conversation back and forth over the last 5 years or so because we were coming at it being on the same team with compassionate curiosity, rather than saying, you're doing this wrong, you shouldn't be doing that, that should and shouldn't.
I want to say this as a disclaimer. I'm reflecting back to you. What I'm seeing is not an entry-level conversation in a relationship. Don't just jump feet first into, hey, I can see some weird shit's happening. Because if you haven't had that conversation, boundaries are in everything. Boundaries in the way in which we communicate with the people that we care about. There were many, many times that Tasha kept saying, I want things to be different, I want things to be different. And she wasn't doing anything different. And I was like, hey, you're not doing anything different.
Yes, I am.
There you go.
Yeah, that's how that went.
That was the volume.
Yeah.
And the reality is we had to create, through compassion and curiosity, through asking both of ourselves, what do you want, what do you need, boundaries on how to have conversations that were challenging so that we could help each other see that we weren't actually doing the thing we said we wanted to do. But that is a boundary. That is my boundary is, please do not point something out to me while I am clearly heightened, because I probably can't hear you even if you're being nice.
Yeah.
And so when is the time? That is that part of that boundary conversation. And so it has a lot of layers, and it all starts with compassion, curiosity, of getting to know yourself so that you can know. I literally cannot have a conversation 20 minutes after I just had a really activating experience. If you don't get to know yourself, then you don't have that information available to you, and you can't give it to the people that actually need it, which are the people that are in your life that are supporting you emotionally, physically, financially, whatever it may be.
You actually have another couple days to watch the free masterclass that we have. So if you haven't already watched the Nervous System Regulation and Unique Life Circumstances masterclass, the one that's called Regulate to Elevate, message us, masterclass, and we will send you the link to catch that free, because after this weekend, it's going to be locked into the Summer Masterclass series and you can't access it unless you buy the whole package. We have one question I want to answer real quick before we close out, because I do want to go berry picking. Sierra says, I'm still figuring out how to do this as an adult child with my extended family. Any advice? Tons of advice, but what I can share with you in this moment right now, hi, McNew mom of two, shoot us a message, because these comments disappear once we end the actual live. So shoot us a DM and I'll send you the masterclass link. The thing with your extended family, your parents in particular, your siblings in particular, those people that have been with you since you were born and through all of the various seasons of learning how to be a human, are the hardest people to put boundaries in place with. They're the hardest. It is literally wired into your nervous system to not push these people away in any way. And if you have any abandonment wounds, any rejection wounds, with trauma that your nervous system was wired with, most of us do if you're following our account, and that is going to make it harder for you to not take their response and their reaction to you putting boundaries in place personally. It makes you feel really like you're in danger. And so the advice I would give to you is that don't start with your family putting boundaries in place. Don't start with those people. Start with people that you have low stakes with. That's the first suggestion. And the second one is understanding that when you're putting boundaries in place, if you do not include nervous system regulation in the process, you're not going to be able to put the boundary in place and hold it. It's just not how it's going to work. And this is something that is never discussed in any of the boundaries conversations we see anybody else talking about, which is why we reverse engineered our process of putting boundaries in place to be able to figure out why was it so hard for us and what were the things that we wish we had known. And in the boundaries masterclass, that's part of the Summer Masterclass series, we're talking about our 7-step process for trauma-informed boundaries. Trauma-informed boundaries means you're acknowledging that your body screams there's danger when you start changing the expectations that other people have of you. And when you do that, there's a ripple effect that happens in your family, especially in your family of origin, because you've always been this way. Now you're changing how you show up to that relationship. They have a really hard time with it. Has nothing even to do with you. This is usually about your parents' abandonment wounds, your parents' emotional wounds or trauma from their childhood that they most likely don't recognize. And so when it comes to advice about how to start putting boundaries in place with your extended family, don't expect them. I'm sorry. The first one is don't start with them. Put boundaries in place other places first. Second, nervous system regulation has to be part of the process. And third, don't expect them to receive these new boundaries warmly. That's not how this is going to go. And you need to expect them to be upset and also not take on that responsibility of making them happy with your boundaries, because it's just not going to be conducive.
So I want to add 2 things to that.
And we have to be done.
Yes. I want to add 2 things to that. One is, if you have gotten to a place where you feel like you're ready to start doing things with family, the thing that I would suggest is, if there is a person in your extended family that you are close enough with, that you feel safe enough with, start with them. And it doesn't, when we start a conversation with, I'm doing this new thing and I'm going to start putting boundaries in place, everybody just starts fucking putting up great big walls, because the social message is, you've done something wrong and now I've got to put a stop to it. Like, that's what the boundaries conversation is. And so being able to, and I'm just going to use an example that I don't know if it's real, like if you have a sister that you're really close with, being able to go to your sister and something completely innocuous like, hey, by the way, I'm trying something new with my house and I'm just not going to eat ice cream anymore. Like, if that was a thing you guys did, letting them know, like, I'm just doing something different. You can keep doing what you're doing and I'll keep showing up, but I'm just not going to be interacting in that way. That is a boundary. It doesn't sound like a big deal, and it doesn't sound like it's, like, I don't know, emotionally guarding or anything, but it is practice. And so being able to just let people know about tiny little changes, part of it is letting them know, like, I don't expect anything different from you. I'm just going to keep doing this, do it, and we'll keep talking, whatever. That's a great way to practice. The other thing that I think is important is, consider how you would feel if any of your family started acting in a different way that didn't align with how you are acting right now. Like, out of nowhere, your mom or your sister or your dad or your brother or somebody came up and they were like, this thing I used to do my entire life, never doing it again. Whatever that thing is, even if it doesn't impact your life, it impacts your perception of that person. Give yourself a moment to put yourself in their shoes by doing that, because that might be something they do in the future anyway. And so recognizing that that feeling is the kind of feeling that putting new boundaries in place or releasing things that you used to do all the time is going to evoke is just good information to have. It's not intended to change what you do, but recognizing, like, oh, this is what that feels like. Like, their reaction makes so much more fucking sense, because if my dad came to me out of nowhere and was like, just so you know, got my pilot's license and I'm only flying everywhere forever, like, that's weird. What the fuck is dad doing? But at the same time, it doesn't fucking matter, but that's weird. And so it changes your perception of that person. It's going to change their perception of you. Understanding that is part of the compassion part of recognizing, like, I do need to do my own thing, but I also have to let them have their reaction to me being me is different than what they're used to. So those are the 2 things that I would also add on to what Tasha was saying.
You don't have to be around while they have the reaction.
True.
So they can have the reaction and you can say, good, see that you need to process this. I'm going to go and not be around for this. So hopefully that answers your question, Sierra. There is so much more about this that we give you step-by-step direction for in the masterclass, summer masterclass series, the Happy Healthy Boundaries masterclass that's in that, including scripts, inspiration scripts of like actual wording you can use in lots of different scenarios, personally, professionally, as well as a workbook that you can start working through. We'll give you a step-by-step system on how to figure out what those boundaries are that you need for specific people in your life. Like, we really give you the actual actionable steps, because that's one of the things we really wish we had when we were learning about boundaries and learning about all of the things we had to survive and overcome with each other and in the other parts of our life. So I saw one question: does the masterclass link cost money? So the free masterclass about the nervous system regulation and unique life circumstances is still free through the weekend. It will then be moved to the summer masterclass series bundle, which is not free. It's $111 right now for all 4 of those masterclasses, and that's a flash sale that's happening right now. So if you want that, and you'll have all 4 masterclasses as they happen, because 3 of them haven't happened yet, we will send you those as they are done, and you'll have all of that content and all of those lessons to watch at your leisure and revisit. Most of our clients who have the previous version of our Boundaries Masterclass have rewatched it every couple of months, because they are able to add a layer, and then they go back and add another layer, and they get more and more comfortable, more confident in putting boundaries in place, because there's a system to use to do that. So thanks for joining us today. It was great to hear from all of you and see where you're coming in from, and see that this is something that's resonating with you. If you have more questions about today's conversation, feel free to comment below or send us a message in DMs. We'll be back again tomorrow to be able to answer those questions and answer any other last minute questions you have about the flash sale that's going on in our stories. Anything else?
I don't think so.
I think that's it. We're going to go berry picking. I'll share some of those stories this afternoon too. We will see you tomorrow for another live, and see you in the DMs to answer any questions. Bye, loves.
See you, everybody.